tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
One thing I wanted to talk about, all of these politicians that have presided over this decline have gotten a pay raise. Have you gotten a pay raise yet this year? I don't see a lot of hands out there. I mean, I'm looking at a camera, but I'm imagining that if you're sitting in your living room or driving around, you probably wouldn't have raised your hand for that had I actually asked you to in a serious way. Well, parliamentarians play by different rules than we do. Much as the folks we scrummed on the streets of Davos last week, it's rules for me and rules for thee. Never the twain shall meet. Just to look at the numbers here, courtesy of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, MP pay increases are going up between $8,100 and over $16,000, depending on whether you are a lowly backbench MP, then you're on the bottom end, or if you are Justin Trudeau, he's on the top end. This is a 4.2% pay raise starting April 1st. Well, that is, as I understand it, larger than inflation. So we're not even just talking about keeping up with cost of living. We're talking about actually getting more money for a job well done. I'm not exactly sure about that. Kris Sims is sure of most things, though, in this world. She is the Alberta director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and back with us as on every Monday. Kris, I'm not messing up the numbers here, right? This is more than inflation for the last year.
As far as we can tell, yeah. We have to also keep in mind how much these MPs are paid for things like housing, right? All of their bills are paid, their travel is paid, all that stuff that you and I will have to, save money for, things like your heating bills or transportation, anything like that, your rent, your mortgage. The vast majority of that is covered courtesy of the taxpayer. And we really need to stress here, the Prime Minister is now going to be making, as of April 1st, once these pay raises kick in, the Prime Minister is now going to be paid more than $405,000. So just picture what you make, quadruple it, more than quadruple it. Imagine yourself as the taxpayer, which you probably are, and you're working, 9 to 5, you're working 40 hours a week. You probably work pretty hard for what you do earn. Now, picture $405,000 plus expenses. So we have to keep in mind that he gets to stay in a mansion, which is called Rideau Cottage, but it's not a cottage, right next to the Governor General. And we pay for this massive lake house at Harrington Lake. And we pay for all of his transportation. So again, $405,000. This is what's annoying, though, is that we're not hearing enough members of Parliament, Andrew, speaking up against these pay hikes, including from some of the usual suspects that we would be expecting to speak up against these automatic pay increases. So we want to see members of Parliament really walk the talk here. If they want to truly save taxpayers' money, they should do leadership things and lead by example and say, you know what? I'm going to donate all of my pay raise to charity. And as soon as my team, we don't care if it's the blue team or the orange team, as soon as my team is in power, I'm going to stop these MP pay increases and perhaps even cut Member of Parliament pay. That would be novel, and that's something we want to see coming out of Ottawa.
And one thing that I would point out here as well is that this is exactly the problem of automatic increases. I don't think there should ever be an automatic escalator on a tax or on a pay increase, because it lets politicians do exactly what they're doing now, which is say, oh, I didn't do it. I didn't vote for it. I mean, they should really have to vote for this every time they want to do it and own why they are, in fact, doing it.
Yeah, we need to zero in on that as well, because we'll sometimes hear politicians say, oh, well, exactly what you said. I didn't vote for this. Yeah, we know. There's a law that automatically increases your pay on April 1st, no fooling, and you don't need to trot yourself into the House of Commons. You don't even need to sign up through Zoom or whatever terminology they're using there and vote for your own pay increase. But what's really disingenuous is when they throw their hands up in the air metaphorically and say, oh, what are we to do? It's automatic. They work in the legislature. They are legislators. They create law. They could stop this tomorrow if they felt like it. So it's not as if some sort of alien god of government is forcing Prime Minister Trudeau to take more than $405,000 home every year and is foisting this upon him unwillingly. That is not happening. Okay, he's the Prime Minister. They could stop this tomorrow if they felt like it. Apparently, though, they just don't feel like it. And it's always bad when politicians are taking big pay hikes. But especially now, as my friend Franco Terrazzano points out, people are struggling to afford hamburger. Like, I was just doing my family grocery shopping last night, and I noticed a family ahead of me. The mom was putting away the grapes and putting away the stuff that she could, eke out and do without with her kids that week. These are the people paying for these politicians' pay increases. So that's pretty gross, and we want to see them stopped. A lot of us, I can't speak for you, but a lot of us in the private sector, during the lockdowns and the madness that was happening over the last 4 years, right in the heat of it, in the teeth of it, at the worst of it, a lot of people in the private sector took pay cuts. They probably took pay cuts for a long time. In some cases, they even lost their jobs. And now just imagine the small business owners who were completely locked out, frozen out, lost everything. These are the people who are paying for these politicians' pay increases. They've not missed one.
Well,
On
and I
it,
was just going to
yeah.
bring up the SEBA payouts. I mean, we have businesses across this country that cannot afford to pay back I think it's $40,000 in a lot of cases if people took the full amount in SEBA loans. Now,
Yep.
look, they took this back. They took this money. They knew they were going to have to pay it back. But you have businesses that are saying, I literally cannot afford this. Well, governments are finding room in their budget to pay MPs more. And I don't want to do the math here, but you even take that lower number, $8,000,
Yeah.
and multiply it by 338. That's massive.
Yeah, it's an enormous amount of money. And as far as the $1.2 trillion debt goes, it's not going to balance our books, but it leads by example. And if we saw politicians and MPs leading by example and saying, you know what, I'm going to take a pay cut. Here's my stipend, here's my pay stub, I'm taking this pay cut, or I'm going to campaign on cutting everybody's pay. I'm going to make sure that we actually put our time and our dues in too. That would go a long way. And to your point on folks who were taking CERB, yeah, that needs to be payback, but we need to be as compassionate and kind and patient as possible, because in many cases, these businesses were forced to lock down. They were forced to shut down. This is not something that they just woke up in 2020 and said, you know what feels like a fun idea? I'm going to completely freeze out all of my employees. I'm going to close the restaurant that I worked for 20 years. No sane person does that. So by and large, most of the folks who were taking those payments were doing so to keep the lights on somehow, to keep even their credit rating flowing in hopes that they could one day open up again. So yes, they do need to pay it back, but we need to be as calm and reasonable and kind as possible. And that is not something we're seeing coming from this federal government. It really reminds me, Andrew, remember back in the before times when the CRA was shaking down waitresses for every single dollar tip they got?
Yeah.
They were going after girls working at the mall, Andrew, saying, did you get 40% off that pair of slacks? Well, that's a taxable benefit. Like, this is crazy. These are the same people jetting off to places like you just got back from, and thank you for covering that, you know?
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. I wanted to ask you the devil's advocate position here, because we do hear sometimes people say, listen, if you want to attract good people in politics that aren't there for the money, there needs to be some fair compensation. And I'm sympathetic to the argument in some way. I mean, not everyone can afford to do the Donald Trump thing and say, I'm going to donate my salary to charity. Or I think Javier Milei in Argentina, I think he did like a raffle for his salary, which was like, again, it sounded impressive, like, 2.5 million pesos, but it was like $2,000 or something. But how should this be dealt with? Because obviously you can't just bake in a salary in 1867 and never increase it. So how should this be dealt with?
As minimally as humanly possible. So let's start even from the ground up, from local politics, okay? Unfortunately, now you're seeing at local city halls in places like Calgary and Edmonton, the mayors being paid more than the premiers. You are seeing councillors whose life goal it is to park their butts at city council for the next 10, 15, 20 years and make a career of it. That was never the role of local government. Local government was always staffed by people who were former teachers, retired police officers, current shop owners, people who were either directly currently invested in what was going on in their neighborhoods, like a shopkeeper, or had already worked most of their lives and now had time to give back. That is the entire reason why we call it public service. Okay? They should be paid a stipend for showing up to those meetings and doing the homework and writing the reports. That should not be a career goal of a 4-year undergrad in poli-sci and city planning degree person. That is not what that is supposed to be for. That's where the rot starts. Okay? It's that level of entitlement and permanent government that leads to this sort of nonsense. Then you jump up provincial. It's slightly better, slightly worse than city politics by and large. Now you're at the federal level. I would turn the question around and say, are you getting good value for money? So when you think of all the different services you have from private corporations, whatever it is, internet service, food production, delivery time, all that stuff, airplane tickets, think of all of the services that you actually use and get over a calendar year. Ask yourself if you're getting good value for the money that you pay. Be as honest as you can. Mm-hmm. Now ask yourself if you're getting awesome value for money from your federal politicians. I'm venturing a guess that the answer is usually no. So the whole argument of, well, we need to attract good people, are we?
All right, I have one weird idea I want to run by you.
Okay.
A part of it I don't like, but I think there's something to it if we massage it a little bit. For every dollar you cut in spending, you get 10% that goes to the House of Commons as salaries.
I'm going to have to think about that, but I like it.
Yeah, you have like your base salary is like, $100 a week or something. But for every dollar you save that year, 10 cents of it goes into a pool that pays MPs, but you only get it if you voted in favor of the spending cut.
That's so smart.
Otherwise, everyone cut spending and then the NDP gets to benefit from the spending cut commission. I don't know. There's something to this. I've got to figure out the fine-tuned details.
Have you bought the domain name yet or no?
I don't know. What's the domain name?
Cuts for paychecks, cuts for
what is it?
Cuts for cookies. When do you get your cookie? When you made your cut? Something like that.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm trying to think of. All right, we'll try to come up with a snappy name, and we'll book the domain. By the way, I would never normally tell a lady to disrobe, but I have to point out that the way your jacket is, it was saying "Fund CBC" the entire interview.
Oh no! Let's not do that. No.
Although we did it, one of my colleagues did email and say he wanted that shirt. So.
Oh, nice. Well, we don't make money off of them. They're at cost. I think they're only $20. Just go to our website. Everything is included. We don't make money off of it. We just want to spread the good word that we should defund the CBC, not fund.
Actually had I haven't read it yet, but you flagged a CBC story for my producer. What's going on there?
Very quickly, and we can touch on this again next week. While you guys were out holding truth to power and speaking truth to power, thank you very much in Davos for doing that, because that's where a lot of bad ideas come from, folks. We need to cut them off there. So thank you for doing that. Blacklock's reporter uncovered the fact that, you know how the CBC talks about how vitally important they are for Indigenous programming? Well, apparently 0.3%, so 0.3% of their money goes towards Indigenous programming. And Blacklock's found that they cut that budget, the Indigenous programming budget, by about $25,000 last year. So the next time that the bigwigs at CBC try to say, oh, we're essential, no, you're not. And in fact, you cut that funding.
Nice. Well, I think that is definitely something we should look into. Yeah, CBC always loves to do the glitzy, glamorous stuff and not the things that are actually in their mandate. We will let you go there. Kris, I got it. Chops for checks.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, chops for checks. So that's the initiative. It's better than voter recall. You have to make chops to get your check, and if you do it, then we can talk. But Kris Sims, Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, always a pleasure, and we will talk to you next Monday.
You bet.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.